Hello and welcome back to the Empowered Minds podcast. I'm your host, Nathalie Bedrossian, coach and aspiring speaker. In today's episode, again, a very interesting one. I'm very excited to welcome back Christelle Khoury. Today, we're going to have a different episode. Last one we did was about social anxiety. So make sure to check that episode out. We discussed a lot about social anxiety there. And today, we're going to discuss a more specific topic. So a subtype of social anxiety, performance anxiety, and also perfectionism. So welcome back, Christelle.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you
really happy to be here for the second episode.
Thank you so much for being here again, for coming back. It's a delight to have you and to talk to you
Stop, you're gonna make me
about
blush.
about students and mental health, and yeah, how to help them actually navigate their mental health a bit better. So today we're talking about performance anxiety. So can you tell our audience, tell our students a little bit about what performance anxiety is?
Like you said, I highly recommend that you watch the video that we did before last time on social anxiety, but performance anxiety is actually categorized as a subtype of social anxiety. So there are certain people that are not anxious in all social circumstances, but that have what we call, in the common general words, stage fright. So what is stage fright? It's mostly when you get anxious in situations where there's a lot of people and there's a risk of being judged or scrutinized by many people. And this can trigger the whole anxious behaviors that we discussed on the previous episode. So that's pretty much it. It's just, and we'll talk more about the situations that can trigger it, but it's really an extreme sense of anxiety in situations where you're exposed to a lot of people that are at risk of judging you or scrutinizing you.
And evaluating your
And
performance.
evaluating you 100%.
Yeah, because that's how you perceive it. Like you're on stage, you're either giving a speech, right? And you're either performing, whether it's music, whether it's dance, and it's really being kind of exposed to potential
And
evaluation from others.
Even just giving a presentation at school, if you want to apply it to like students.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you categorize like test anxiety as a part of of performance anxiety?
It definitely presents itself in a similar way. I don't think factually it's in the same category, but I tend to put them in the same one because for test anxiety, you also get super anxious about your performance in the test and you're afraid of failing. In performance anxiety, you're more afraid of being judged or embarrassing yourself.
It's really, so performance anxiety is when others are watching.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Versus test anxiety can just be there on its own without having anyone watch you.
Because there's no risk of like embarrassing yourself in a test. I mean, someone who is socially anxious or has performance anxiety, possibly if like there's a lot of people around you, are going to be more stressed. But test anxiety is really just fear of failing in the test or like not doing as good as you want to do. And so in a way it is very similar, but it's less so about other people watching you and you being at risk of feeling embarrassed.
Yeah. So let's talk about the triggers or like the situations where some students might feel performance anxiety. Like what are some of those?
Triggers where students might feel performance anxiety. So like we said, it's really more in situations where there's a lot of people watching. So in presentations, definitely. And we all know that there's a lot of like group presentations, a lot of things to do in university. I know you coach university students, but also like even in school and things like that. There's a lot of presentations in front of a public, even if it's like just the teachers or just a couple of people. It's a lot of eyes on you. There's people watching, and that can be a huge trigger. Otherwise, I mean, it could be in school when there's like rehearsals or, you're part of a show, things like that, extracurriculars. Performance anxiety can play a huge part because you're not able to, perform as well as you would want to in front of crowds, whether you're like I'm giving that example because I was like in theater when I was in university, but when there's like theater shows or things like that, it's much harder. I don't know if you have ideas of other situations that you feel like
I actually had a question for you about that. So does it have to be like a crowd or can it be one person? Like, for example, I know I used to get very anxious. Like when I I would do a task and there's just someone watching me doing the task, whether it's at a job, like you're in training, you're doing the task and someone is just watching you.
Yeah.
Is that also considered as performance anxiety?
Well, it depends. What were your thoughts when that person was watching you? Like, what were you afraid of?
Don't mess up.
Don't mess up. Okay, so you were afraid you were gonna mess up, and you were gonna feel how exactly?
Judged.
Okay.
Yeah.
Embarrassed.
Like it's again as if I'm being evaluated
Yeah.
in that situation.
Yeah.
So would that also be considered as performance anxiety? Like, does it always need to be a big crowd?
No, it doesn't need to be a big crowd, especially if it's someone who kind of is in a position of authority, or I don't know if, like, if it was a teacher or someone watching you, then definitely you're saying it was when you were playing piano that it happened to.
So that was usually like in when I was younger in like job context,
Okay.
like any little job you take, like your supervisor is behind you
Yeah.
and watching you, doing your
Yeah.
thing, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But you could still get anxious in these situations. So I was just wondering, like, does it always have to be a big crowd or?
I would say no.
Okay.
It can be just like the more eyes on you, the more stressful it is. But even if it's just a few eyes or let alone one eye, I mean, technically, I guess it comes at the border of like social anxiety and performance anxiety in that context. But if you're only stressed when people are watching you, and there's a lot of eyes on you and you're actually performing something, then it's more performance anxiety than social anxiety.
Yeah. And you mentioned the piano. I was
Yeah.
definitely
I
anxious
think you were
about
telling
that
me
as
about it
younger.
earlier.
Yes, I was. We were actually talking about this a little bit earlier. But I used to play the piano growing up. And like parents wanted you to play in front of family. They wanted you to do all of that. And we had annual shows, and that would like literally cause me sleepless nights before like shows, recitals. I would not be able, like it would make me so anxious. And during the recital, even if I knew it by heart, it would actually mess up my performance. Like it would actually make me mess up some notes just because there's like this idea of they're watching, they're evaluating, which is not like which is technically what performance anxiety is, right?
It's exactly that. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned, well, it's not funny actually, but it's important that you mentioned the sleep problems that come with it. It's very, very common that when people are anxious about a performance the next day or even a test, so test anxiety as well, it can lead to a lot of sleepless nights and difficulty sleeping. And there's something that is actually called sleep performance anxiety.
Okay.
So once you're like not able to sleep, then you start getting worried about not being able to fall asleep, and then you're even less able to fall asleep because you're just worried about not falling asleep, and the cycle goes on and on and on. So it's funny because people that have performance anxiety are also more likely to have that because it's also a kind of performance. Like you want to sleep well, you want to perform well in sleep. Like if
everything is a show, everything is a performance.
Like what if I don't get my 6 hours of sleep? Like I'm gonna mess up on my test, or I'm not gonna be able to perform whatever. But yeah, so sleep is a very important thing when whether you're anxious or not, actually, to be able to perform. But we'll get into that, I guess.
Definitely. And do you feel like in some situations performance anxiety can be triggered? And in others not. Like, for example, I can give you personally an example. So I used to play music and I also dance. So we do have also shows when we dance. I would not get performance anxiety when it comes to dance. Like you could get the regular stage, like the anxiety, the kind of adrenaline, but it was never performance anxiety in itself. Like, do you feel like that's common? Are there certain situations where people are more anxious?
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Did you feel like you mastered better the dance movements than like, the piano notes or whatever? Because sometimes the more you practice, the better you get at something, right? And the more you practice, the more it's rooted inside of you and you're able to do it without thinking that much. So definitely if you were more used to going to dance and if you repeated the movements many, many times and there's other people too who the spotlight might be on, then definitely that's like a hindering factor.
Yeah.
Whereas again, the example of the piano, like you're the only one playing, and if you mess up one note, then it's gonna mess up the whole thing. So, and I don't know about you, but like I know you dance like very, very well. I don't know about the piano, like you're telling me back then you were still learning, so maybe that was harder for you because there was a higher chance of you messing up. Just
Definitely.
because it's
there definitely was a higher chance of me messing up, and I definitely practiced less the piano. Lots of procrastination in there, and with the stress.
I mean, we have limited hours in a day.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so we talked about what performance anxiety is. We talked about what situations might trigger performance anxiety and how like test anxiety is a little bit different. How do you feel like performance anxiety or test anxiety can affect a student's performance in these different situations?
Anxiety in general can be again, I can't talk. It happens often in these podcasts. My God, it can be very crippling.
Mm-hmm.
So, someone who gets very anxious when they're about to perform or when they're about to take a test, well, it's definitely going to have an impact on their final grade or how
Mm-hmm.
they actually end up doing. And not necessarily because they didn't study enough or not necessarily because they're not good enough and they didn't master that topic, but because in that moment, their capacities are just like frozen because of that
Mm-hmm.
anxiety that is just taking a toll on them. So it could definitely have a negative impact on grades,
Mm-hmm.
on, well, mostly grades for students. I guess that's what you look
Yeah.
for. But even like as I was saying, like in social clubs and things like that, when there's a lot of eyes on you, it can have an impact on your quality of life and the quality of your work.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not because you're not competent, but because it's taking a toll on you and
Yeah.
it's preventing you from, giving
Yeah.
your best.
And like the energy that you have or the knowledge that you have to spend on the task or on the test or
Yeah,
whatever situation you are is spent on you dealing with the symptoms of the
exactly.
anxiety, with the symptoms of I need to perform,
Hmm.
right? It's kind of that's what takes the
They're going to
toll.
judge me. I'm going to get embarrassed. I'm going to mess this up.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's actually not rare that when you ask people, they had everything so well prepared, they
Yeah.
rehearsed it at home the day before, and then they arrive and they're in front of the crowd or in front of like the class, and they just can't find the words or they just can't find the order of the things and how they wanted to say it, and their mind
Mm-hmm.
goes blank.
Yeah.
Like people will say that sometimes. I'm sure it's probably happened to you as well. I mean, it's happened to me. Like
Definitely.
your mind literally goes blank
Yes.
and you
And
feel
you're
like you
just
forgot
like,
everything.
yeah. And you're looking, I'm like, I have it by
Yeah,
heart. You're
yeah,
just kind of like looking in your mind.
yeah.
And that stresses you out even more because the more silent you are,
Exactly.
the more like it's correlated with, okay, they know that I'm going blank. So it kind of just
Yeah.
exponentially explodes in your
Yeah.
mind.
And like you've definitely been in a situation where you were in front of someone who was anxious on stage or in a
Hmm.
presentation. And how did that make you feel?
Um, a lot of empathy, relatability, just
Hmm.
because I have been in that
Yeah.
spot. So I kind of know what they're going through, but it doesn't look as bad as what you're going through.
Hmm.
And that's always something that really struck me.
Yeah.
Like people can talk and you deliver a speech, it's an okay speech, it's a good speech, but they're like, not like I was so anxious. I'm like, really? Like that
Hmm.
much? It didn't really look like
Yeah.
it. So it's always worse in your mind than
Hmm.
what is actually portrayed. And that's what I feel like people should keep in mind.
Hmm.
Like not everyone's in your mind, reading
Yeah.
your thoughts, knowing what you're going through. It's everything is really, really in your mind.
Yeah. And you mentioned at first that you felt a lot of empathy for the person. I mean,
Yes.
most of us don't want to see someone on stage suffer,
Mm-hmm.
maybe some psychopaths do, but in general, it's not, you don't want
It's
to
not
see
the
the person
general
suffer.
case.
So what you usually do is, you start giving them like a smile or like
Mm-hmm.
nodding, like,
Yes,
okay, like
that
it's
was
okay. It's
that.
okay. We do that spontaneously because we mirror that. So as you said, we feel a lot of empathy for the person
Mm-hmm.
that is feeling anxiety. And you also mentioned that that person might sense it more because a lot of times it's like physical symptoms. The
Yes.
palms might start to get sweaty.
Yes.
The heart is beating as if like it's gonna come out of your chest.
Mm-hmm.
You feel nauseous. You feel even headaches. Sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
feel like your mind is all blurred up. A lot of symptoms that you're feeling on the inside, but on the outside, you just look uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the people in the crowd or in front of you look uncomfortable. We're
Mm-hmm.
pretty good, um, like at sensing how someone
Mm-hmm.
is feeling, and we have what's called mirror neurons. So we'll just mirror what the other person is
Yes.
sensing. So yeah, you just feel uncomfortable, and you want to put the other person at ease. So in a way, when you're giving, I'm going to take the example of giving a speech
Mm-hmm.
or kind of like giving a presentation. You want to make sure that you're comfortable in order to make the crowd or the people in um, the classroom comfortable enough to listen to you and to get the message.
Mm-hmm. So how do you make yourself comfortable?
How
Like
do you
if
make
you're
yourself
actually
comfortable?
not.
If you're actually not. Okay. So, I mean, It's about being able to manage the
Yes.
anxiety, not control it. I just want like people to get this out of their minds. You cannot control the anxiety. You cannot get rid of it. And you just have to probably make with the fact that you are likely going to be anxious every single time you go on stage or every single time you're about to give a speech or a presentation or take a test. But it's about how you're going to be able to manage it to feel the least uncomfortable possible.
Yeah. So it's about living, like learn how to live with it and not try to fight it all the time or live like, or just fight against it. It's learn how to live with it.
Acknowledge it.
Acknowledge it, right? It's
Yeah.
present, but like I can do okay without it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Without having that control on it.
Yeah. It's sometimes the more we try to control something, the harder it gets. And especially for someone who's like so rooted in performance, then you want to perform on controlling it, which makes like no sense. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't get better. It does once you learn how to manage it. And that also takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And about the methods for managing performance anxiety.
Yeah.
There's many things. There's some people that believe in, positive comments and like reinforcing yourself and giving yourself like a positive speech in your mind. Sometimes it works for certain people, sometimes it doesn't, and it's more stressful for other people. So you can always try it, but it doesn't work for everyone. Or, like there's also these methods about standing up in front of a mirror and, like just giving yourself like a
Affirmation,
an affirmation speech, or like just your posture, standing up straight, looking at yourself in the mirror and saying like, I can do this, smiling to yourself. All of these things before a show or before a presentation are very valuable, and even before an interview they've been proven to like be effective.
It's what is it, the Superwoman pose, the Superman pose?
Yeah, there's that.
It's like that posing that, and it does actually help, by the way, or like reduce your performance anxiety before.
It gives you like a sense of confidence.
Exactly.
And sometimes we don't realize how tightly related the body and the mind are. So a lot of the things that you do with your body will affect your mind.
Yes.
Another way, though, to manage it is just to, as I said, to acknowledge that it's there. So when you're about to perform, I'm going to use the word perform. Already that word sounds stressful. Like, when you're about to perform or just do something where like there's people looking at you, or even when you're about to take a test, when you feel the anxiety pop up, just greet it. Like say hi to it. Like, oh, hi, anxiety. I noticed that you're here. No, it's very important to be able to make fun of your thoughts and to like use your sense of humor, because the moment that you acknowledge or like you just literally greet it, you stop the cycle of it spinning and like escalating. It doesn't mean it's going to go away. But once you've recognized it, you've like stopped it at this level and it won't go higher.
And you know what that does too? It dissociates you from it.
Exactly.
It's like, it's not me.
Yeah.
It's like maybe like another person or another persona in my mind. And the fact that you're just like, hey, what's up? I noticed you here. It just kind of makes you dissociate from it, right? And take a step back and be like, that's not me.
Exactly.
Right? I'm another.
It's
like,
a thought.
I'm a separate. It's a thought.
It's a thought.
Yeah.
Like we tend to take our thoughts to be facts, but they're not.
Oh, they're
we have a million thoughts passing in our heads, and like they're not all true. They're literally just thoughts. And what you talked about is actually it's called diffusion. You're diffusing from that thought. Like you acknowledge that it's there, but I'm not gonna fuse to you. And there's I'm taking this example from an author. He's called Russ Harris. He wrote The Happiness Trap. I don't know if you've read it, but it's very good. And he mentions that you can even make fun of it while using like some weird voices. So like you could use Donald Duck's voice, or like even use it as Donald Trump. Okay, anxiety's here. I acknowledge anxiety's here. We're gonna take it. Anxiety's here. Anxiety's here. You know, like you can literally. Or what I like to do, because I love Friends, I use Janice's voice sometimes.
Oh
my God, anxiety.
That's actually hilarious. Okay, so you guys, if you want to deal with anxiety, make up this persona in your mind and talk to it in a way that like you find funny or that you relate to. That's going to completely diffuse yourself. You can just
say, oh, hey,
from
Janice.
that thought. Yeah, exactly.
So like this is the way. It's really about playing with these thoughts. laughing it out. When, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid and I was going to give presentations and things like that, my parents would always say, like, picture the crowd naked, or
Mm-hmm.
like picture them like completely weird, or like weirder than you, or things like that.
Does that work? I feel like that would make me more
It's
anxious.
actually very creepy to tell a kid to picture
Yeah,
the
like
crowd naked,
why?
but
I
but,
feel like that would just be like, what are you doing?
but you can actually picture it, just like I was saying, to use a voice that is funny. You can
Mm-hmm.
picture a scenario that is funny. So
Yeah.
like, instead of I don't know, like you're talking in front of a crowd, but then you can picture yourself talking in front of, like, I don't know, ducks, or like
Mm-hmm.
people that are dressed up as if they're going to some weird Harry Potter show, like, or things like that that make you feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that way, when you look at them, you're able to smile at yourself because you prepared that thought before going in.
Yeah.
So those are like very fun ways to do it. It's not easy,
Mm-hmm.
but it all starts with recognizing it and greeting it, and kind of like just realizing, as you said, that, okay, this is not me, this is a thought,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
I'm not gonna spin on that thought.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like realize it's there. I'm not gonna control it. I'm gonna accept it. I'm gonna work from here on giving my best performance.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about like visualization techniques? Like, let's
Hmm.
say either before a test, before a performance, is it actually useful to just sit back, visualize yourself like in a kind of meditative state about you performing well at either that test or either that speech or whatever situation you're in?
Hmm. It definitely works for
Mm-hmm.
some people. I've heard about that. Sitting and visualizing yourself, especially if it becomes something that you do as part of a routine.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's very important to have a specific routine
Yes.
that you can kind of have a sense of control over
Mm-hmm.
before a performance, before a test, before anything. So if this is part of your routine, it's definitely going to make you feel better.
Yeah.
For some people, it can also be just listening to a song they really like and that motivates them.
Mm-hmm.
Or doing both, visualizing how you're going to perform and at the same time, like having some calming music,
Yeah.
breathing technique that we discussed on the other episode. Um, and just like something that makes you feel connected to a part of yourself that is very soothing to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're very visual, that might help.
Awesome. Awesome. So another honestly subject that I really love and is also connected to performance anxiety is perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
And as
That's me.
yeah, I'm telling you, I consider myself as like a rehabilitated perfectionist.
Rehabilitated. Please
Rehabilitated.
help.
So let's talk a little bit about it. First, like, what is perfectionism?
Oh boy. What is perfectionism? I will tell you, I do not have the exact definition. What I believe perfectionism to be is that you always, well, the way perfectionists work in life is that they tend to set very, very high goals and many, many, often, more often than not, unrealistic tasks or
Mm-hmm.
unrealistic ways of going about things, of performing in specific situations,
Mm-hmm.
that are pretty hard to reach and sometimes impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they will reach them. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
they, but I'm also like that sometimes. So sometimes you will be able to reach it, but other times it might also lead to anxiety. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like this is where you're coming about it, that perfectionists are are their worst critic in
Mm-hmm.
a way. Like, you
Yes.
criticize yourself a lot.
Yes.
So at some point, it might lead to anxiety when you realize that you're like hitting a wall, or you're not able to perform
Mm-hmm.
perfectly, because
Yeah.
there's no such thing as perfection.
Mm-hmm. And also perfectionism, I feel like there's a good way to do it, there's a bad way to do it. But perfectionism in itself, it's really rooted in shame because
Mm.
there's the aspect of I won't be good enough if I don't perform at this level, or like I'd be ashamed if I don't perform at this level. But there's also the thing where like you can strive for these high achieving goals, like, right, you but the difference I make between both is like I call them striving for excellence,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's perfectionism,
Mm.
because perfectionism is more like debilitating in a sense that you're going to strive to be so perfect that it's going to lead you to be paralyzed, that it's going to lead you to like procrastinate, it's going to lead you to not even start on the task that you want to be so perfect
Mm-hmm.
at.
Yeah.
So like, there's this expression or saying that like um aim for the stars, land on the moon, like aim, shoot for the stars, fall short, or
No, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars.
yes, that one exactly.
I don't
Thank
know
you for
why I know.
that.
You're welcome. You're
Thank you for
welcome.
that. So it's like you'll aim so high that like even if you fall short, you'll fall somewhere that's pretty good. What do you think about that? Like, do you feel like it's somewhat good to set these immensely high standards?
I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just the thing is, the more of a perfectionist you are, the least you'll be satisfied if you actually land on the stars. You're always going to be looking at the moon and, oh my God, I could have gone there.
Yes.
So it's about also setting high standards for yourself for sure, but not being so rigid about them and not being so like black and white about them, not being so like, for perfectionists, like extreme perfectionists, we all have like a degree of perfectionism in us, and it's not bad, but it's actually a type of personality disorder as well. It's called obsessive compulsive personality disorder for these people that are extremely perfectionists. So it becomes like a personality disorder when it's on an extreme scale, that everything, there is a good way and a bad way to do it, and you will not tolerate it done any other way than the good way that you see.
And I feel like you put it in such a great way. Like things are never black or white.
Nope.
Like it's always gray. It's always malleable. It always evolves with time too.
Yeah.
Like you evolve as a person. So how can you set yourself to these standards and like not expect these standards to evolve as well as you evolve? Like it's never black or white. And that was honestly one of the things that really helped me overcome it. It's realizing that it's never about it being perfect. It's never about it being good. Like there's always room for improvement. As long as you have that mindset of the goal is to become better and not to become like perfect or good or, it's always to improve. I feel like that just kind of calms the perfectionist down, like the perfectionist side of you down. Yeah. So, my personal experience on
it's funny, I read coming here, I read a quote. Anyway, I read something that said, you are allowed to feel proud about where you've gotten, even if you're not where you thought you would be.
Yes.
So, I don't know, it kind of like resonated in that we often achieve a lot of things, but it's a human tendency. It's the way we're made to always want more and more and more. Yes. And the more you reach something, the higher you want to go. So it's not necessarily pathological as such, but it can be very stressful and can generate a lot of anxiety. And definitely people that are perfectionists have a higher risk of like having performance anxiety.
But I feel like if you kind of change the way you see that and see it as like, oh, like I've done this, I could still do more. Like instead of being, oh, like what's next, like not appreciating what you've done, but just looking forward to continue improving, to continue like looking forward to new challenges, continue achieving more. I feel like you can see that in such a positive light too. Like it doesn't have to be so negative, because that's what life is anyway. Like you're always gonna evolve, you're always gonna want something better, and that's a good thing to always want something better too, right? But it's just about also being proud about what you've done, how you've progressed so far.
And it's also about not seeing, well, maybe this goes beyond the scope of perfectionism, but it's also about not seeing life as a clear-cut straight line of like things you have to do and like this is the way it has to be and I will not deviate from that line. Like, sometimes you're allowed to dance around that line and just like zigzag, or like even you're allowed to stay on that dot and dance around it for a while too. And you're allowed to make your life like, oh my God, I'm being so philosophical here, but make it like out of dots that are not necessarily that well connected to each other. And each and every one of us finds their purpose at a different point in life. And we just have so much stress and so many expectations set on us by the world and by our parents, by everything around us in life, that those are things that are impregnated in us ever since we're kids. So it's not rare that people that are perfectionists or that have performance anxiety, they're not born like that. You're not born with performance anxiety. I mean, again, it's genetic, but it's also a lot about the environment you grew up in, about the pressure that was put on you, about the pressure that you end up putting on yourself because you're just recreating these scripts that, your surrounding as a child created for you.
So it also, like, it often comes from let's say, a child that has grown in an environment where they've been constantly criticized or constantly expected to achieve or perform. So you kind of take that voice and you put it in you. So now you're your constant critic.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's really about people, children who have grown in these types of environments.
Yes, 100%. And we often see that. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes children that grew up in environments that are so chaotic, their only way of maintaining control was to control themselves and to like be their critic and set standards for themselves to be able to survive and thrive in that environment.
It's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Really,
So sometimes you do that as a mirror of the environment you grew up in, and sometimes you do it as a way to survive in such a chaotic environment. So it's actually funny, and there's no way to predict who's going to react in what way, but we see both. And maybe as a side note, the people that have performance anxiety or that just grew up in these contexts and that are extreme perfectionists, those generally are the ones that develop eating disorders after that.
Really?
Perfectionism and eating disorders are very, very related because it's like controlling yourself to an extreme state.
Yeah. Wow. And what other tips would you give people who are perfectionists or people, again, probably not performance anxiety, we've covered that, but let's say people who suffer from perfectionism in a really bad way, and again, not aiming in a healthy way to strive, but it's really affecting their lives?
I mean, we can change, but we can all change to a certain level. Is the way I see it. So I don't think that we can expect someone who is an extreme perfectionist to become completely like easygoing and chill on everything. So you have to have expectations that are realistic to yourself as well. But one way, one way that has helped me, so I'll use that, what I used for myself, I used to always phrase things in, I should do this.
Yes.
I have to do this. Recently, a couple of years back, I started saying, I want to do this. Because technically, there's nothing you have to do. You don't have to take out the trash. The trash can stay there. You just want to take it out. Otherwise, it's going to stink. So once you start framing things in a way that, oh, do I want to do this or do I not want to do this? Rather than I have to. There is absolutely nothing you have to do.
Yeah. And I'd even add to that one thing I've also, because I've been using exactly that. And another thing I actually, how I rephrased it is, I get to do that.
Oh,
like
wow,
I get to go to work.
That's actually really nice.
I get to start my business. I get to do this for others. Like it's something, it's an opportunity that I get to do, that I choose to do, that I want to do.
Yeah.
Right? It's not something that I should do, that I have to, which is something that I used to see before when I was like, when I was back in university. And even when I was at my job, like I used to work in research as a research assistant, and I had a very, very hard time writing articles. So I'd had to, reread them, write certain paragraphs. And the thing is, standards are so high in academia that I was putting so much pressure on myself to find the right word, to like say the right thing and, write it in a good way that in the end, it would take me days to write one paragraph, which is not efficient. Yeah, it paralyzed me. Exactly. And when I learned to kind of let go, to be like, I get to do this, like I get to write this article and be a contributor to this. It's like, okay, like I'm going to start writing the paragraph. It doesn't need to be perfect. I can reread it. And that's how I started doing it. Like I wrote the paragraph. It was a mess at first, guys. Like I'm not going to lie to you. Definitely a mess. I used wrong words everywhere, right? And like you get to reread it. You get to restructure it in different ways, maybe change spots. And the thing is, like, I had other colleagues too, right? It was a work, like was teamwork. Other colleagues who probably read things, added things, modified things. So it's basically working together for a common cause, right? So see yourself as you get to contribute to that thing that you're doing.
Yeah, that's actually a really nice way to put it. And let's say you're in a place that, let's say you absolutely hated what you were doing and you didn't want to do it anymore. And what is the actual worst thing that could happen if you didn't write the article? What is the worst thing that you're going to happen? You're just going to lose your job. In a way, this might look horrible on the outside, but it's not the end of the world. It looks like the end of the world. It feels like the end of the world, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's something that ends up working in your favor. Yeah. And this is something that I used to do as well, because I used to be very stressed when I was going to take exams as well. And I used to have sleepless nights and all that when I was younger. And at the end of the day, what helped me is to tell myself, okay, you know, what is the worst thing that could happen? I'm going to fail the test. Okay, what happens if I fail the test? Well, I get to retake it in a month, you know?
Yeah.
And most of the times I didn't end up failing it, but just de-dramatizing it sometimes might be helpful, even if you know you're probably not going to fail.
100%. And the thing is, we tend to like exaggerate the failures or these worst case scenarios, exaggerate how we're going to react to them, and then exaggerate also like about how even we might sometimes feel happy about things.
Yeah.
Like you might get something, an event, whatever, you feel like, I'm going to be so excited after this. But
Yeah.
when you get there, you're like, okay, like it was good.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with worst case scenarios. Like even if you live the worst case scenario, it's never as bad as you imagine it in your head. Like we kind of have this adaptability as humans to always adapt to the situation no matter what it is. Because if not, like we'd be extinct in thousands of years ago. Like
humans are the
extinct.
most adaptable animals.
Exactly. So if you had like just general tips for students to just build like a healthy mindset and just self-confidence when it comes to performance anxiety, when it comes to perfectionism, what would you tell them?
We covered a little bit about the tips. I still had a few. Is it okay?
Oh, go ahead. Okay. Go ahead. I thought like we were done, but
no, but I actually had a couple as well for like performance anxiety, specifically if you're going to give a presentation, or even if you're going to take a test before. So, or even like for interviews. So let's say for performance anxiety, where you would go on stage or give a presentation in front of people, I think something that could be very helpful is to anchor yourself in the present moment in a task that forces you to do so. Breathing is one of them because, I mean, it's impossible to breathe wrong. I mean, you might have performance anxiety, but you're not going to breathe wrong in front of someone. Like, you're literally just inhaling and exhaling. But another thing that actually I found very interesting is to like tell yourself a tongue twister. You would have to focus in the moment to be able to do that tongue twister. Oh my God, I'm sorry. To be able to do that tongue twister, you have to be anchored in the present moment. You cannot think about anything else.
Yeah.
Another thing would be to try to count from 100 backwards by 16. You really have to focus because
calculate
100 minus 16 equals
84.
Thank God I'm not a mathematician. So like just going backwards from counting the numbers is another thing that you would have to focus on. You know, like just finding a task that you kind of don't hate, but that forces you to anchor yourself in the present moment.
Yeah, that's super interesting, actually.
Yeah. As I said, it could also be like listening to a song that really anchors you, even just deep breathing, things like that. But for people that have more trouble, these specific things that force you to keep your attention on them might be very helpful.
Tongue twisters, counting back.
Yeah,
and
I don't
like...
have one for an example. Tongue twisters. I would have to look them up, but yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like those are a couple of tips. For people that are more anxious before a test, honestly, when you sit in the test, I remember we had to write our names, and then we have like to, oh my God, it's been so long, but we have to like circle the answers or like darken it. Get in the room, sit down, do not look at your paper for 10 seconds, just breathe. Breathe and re-anchor yourself for a little bit. Those 10 seconds are not going to take time away from your test. Like it's better to just anchor yourself in those 10 seconds than to be freaking out about like, oh my God, I forgot about everything. And another thing that works for some people, others maybe not, but it's actually good to not study the day of an exam if it's in the morning, especially. Like I know a lot of people are just sitting and having their breakfast and going through notes, but what you're gonna remember, you already remembered it like from the day before. You're not gonna add any it's not gonna be that helpful to memorize things the day of for that exam. So yeah, and it might trigger your anxiety even more. Definitely. So if it's in the morning, maybe like just don't do anything that morning.
Do something else.
Exactly.
Completely disconnect because the knowledge is already there.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to learn anything new in that
and it's crystallized when you're sleeping. So like you feel like you forgot everything, but trust me, it's just going to come at you when you look at the paper.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if it doesn't, what's the worst that's going to happen? You'll fail and you'll just take it again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I feel like...
But you're not going to fail.
No, you're not going to fail. You're not. But I feel like students... like exaggerate the impact that one exam can have.
Yeah.
You know, like this one exam is going to determine if I get into med school. That's not the case.
No, it's
That's not the case at all. So yeah, any other tips?
Off the top of my head, like that, not really. Do you have any tips that I don't know,
We've
like
talked about a
you've
lot
talked
of
about
them,
yours.
but you know, in general, what I'd say is really like healthy sleep,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's when your knowledge is all,
Exercise.
and like healthy
Exercise.
habits. You guys, I know a lot of people talk about them, a lot of people repeat them. Make time for these. Like exercise does so much for your brain, whether it's learning, whether it's memorization, and sleep as well. Like don't underestimate the impact that these can have on your performance, and nutrition too. I'm not a I'm not a super expert about it, but also what you ingest, what you eat also has an impact about on your performance and your levels of anxiety.
Definitely. I wouldn't be able to say what types of food, but definitely like if you eat better, you feel better in your
Yeah.
body and you're more confident. So you're better able to tackle anxiety and any other issues that come at you in life.
100%.
So yeah.
100%.
And surround yourself with the right people too.
Oh,
Sometimes
support.
support from people around you. It's hard sometimes in university. A lot of people are very, very stressed, and that stress can feed upon you if you're a stressed person as well.
Yeah, you guys, it's kind of contagious. Yeah, when it comes in a group.
I mean, we met in university, but it was in a very non-stressful class.
Yeah.
But yeah, so don't feed off of other people's anxiety. Listen to yourself if you feel like you're in a very stressful position with a specific person. I mean, you don't have to put yourself in those situations.
Yeah,
So,
because it's definitely like contagious. You know, the people you surround yourself with, whether you admit it or not, like their energy, whatever they're feeling, it does rub off on you. Like it does have an impact about how you're feeling. So be careful before an exam, before a certain performance. Make sure you spend time around the right people, around the people who are going to give you that boost instead of people who are going to drag you down.
agreed.
Agreed. So, what's one last thing that you would like to leave our audience with?
I mean, we are so hard on ourselves. We're really hard on ourselves, and we're that way for many reasons because the world has become the world has been fashioned in such a way that performance is hyper valued nowadays. But it's also okay to not always perform as perfectly as you want to. And it's okay to sometimes just cut yourself some slack as well and like literally not do anything.
Oh yeah, like days off where you're just, if you want to watch Netflix, watch Netflix. Do anything that you love and cut yourself some slack. You are not defined by how you perform. You are so much more than that. You are so much more than your performance, your grades, your speech, all of that. You are so much more than that. So if you're listening, I really hope that this has brought some value to you. Thank you so much, Christelle, again for being a guest. We'll definitely have more episodes together where we'll talk more about mental health.
We'll be changing the wire though about other types of
yes. So we'll definitely be discussing several topics. So if you want to know more, stay tuned. And you guys, if you found value within this, don't hesitate to share it with someone you love, with a friend, a family member. If you're struggling with these things, or if you know someone that's struggling with these things, don't be afraid to share this episode with them, to leave a review, and to share the podcast with your loved ones. So I will leave you on that note. I hope you enjoyed this episode and stay tuned for the next one.